Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang namang sanghang namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. Um, so yesterday was the full moon, the Uposatha, and it was the last full moon of the rainy season. And in Thailand, this is called Loi Krathong Day. So it's quite a big day, quite a big holiday in Thailand. People celebrate by taking these little offerings made up of flowers and usually on a piece of a banana tree. And they float them down the rivers. They have candles in them and they're very beautiful. They do it at night. So there's all these beautiful candles and flowers floating down the rivers or in ponds at night. And in some places I've seen they have these floating lanterns. So they light them and they float up in these lanterns. They just float through the air until they burn out. And it's a very beautiful custom they do. And so, um, being the end of the rainy season, that means today is the first day of the cold season. And this is according to the Buddhist calendar, the lunar calendar that we use from the time of the Buddha. And it reflects the seasons that there are in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Whereas in North America, we have 4 seasons. In South and Southeast Asia, there's 3 seasons. There's the hot season, the cold season, and the rainy season. So yesterday was the end of the rainy season. Today is the first day of the cold season. So the weather's a little different here. Instead of having cold weather today, we actually had rainy weather today, which is quite unusual. But we a few months ago at the beginning of the rainy season, it was similar here when we switched from the hot season into the rainy season. Actually, here in Winnipeg, it was hot weather and switched in was rainy weather, sorry, and switched into hot weather. So the seasons are a little off right now. But during the Katina season, so this last month was a month known as the Katina season. So all these different monasteries would have a Katina ceremony. And I had the opportunity to go to a couple Katinas this year. I went to one at a Lao monastery here in Winnipeg and another one at one of the Sri Lankan monasteries here in Winnipeg. And both monasteries, when they had their Katina ceremonies, invited monks from other provinces to come, monks from far distant places to come. So actually, they both invited monks from Alberta. So the Lao monastery invited monks from Calgary, and the Sri Lankan monastery had invited monks from Edmonton. So when I was at the Sri Lankan Katina, I was speaking to this one monk who was from this monastery in Edmonton, and he was telling me about he'd been a monk for a very long time and was telling me about these different countries he's lived in as a monk. First was in Sri Lanka, which is, a very hot country. And then he had lived in Cyprus for a while, again, quite a warm country. And now he's been living in Canada for over a decade and in Edmonton, which, can get quite cold winters. So, it's typical Canadian style. I was asking him, I was like, oh, well, how do you like the winters here in Canada? And his response was, well, um, when it's summer, it's summer, and when it's winter, it's winter. I don't get bothered by it. I don't make a thing out of it. And I thought that was just such a great answer, and just really showed, a lot of where his Dhamma practice is and how well his practice is doing. Because it's very easy for us to um, get taken away, get swept away with things such as the season, and when it's the hot season, we can get, complaining, oh, it's too hot, there's mosquitoes, all this. And then when it's winter time, oh, it's too cold, it's too bitter. And especially in a place here like Winnipeg, we're known for having these really cold, bitter, and windy winters. And, people can really suffer over this. But a lot of times, you see that how much of that suffering is internal, how much of that is because of our attitudes towards it, or because of how we're wanting it to be a way it's not. And so that this monk, he had a lot of this, what we call in Pali, Upekkha, or equanimity towards this situation. And equanimity, it's one of the it appears in different places and in different lists in the suttas. And so in one of them, it's one of the factors of enlightenment, one of these seven factors of enlightenment, the Bojjhangas. And in another place, it's one of the four Brahma Viharas, so these divine abidings. So the four Brahma Viharas, we have metta, which is loving kindness, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, which is appreciative joy, or rejoicing and being happy when good things happen to other people. And the fourth one is upekkha. And it's usually the one we hear the least about, or that there's the least focus about, because out of the four, it's the most difficult to develop. Um, but but it's a very important quality for us to develop. So one of the things which will happen is, just naturally, as we're practicing our meditation, as we're working on our practice, naturally, the certain amount of equanimity is going to be developed. But we can also intentionally put our effort into developing this equanimity, because in life, there's so many ups and downs, and a lot of times we get really carried away with them. When things are going great, we're happy, we're excited, and then when things change and don't go the way we want, we feel down, we feel sad. Or when we get something new we like, we're happy. We lose something we like, we're sad. So we're constantly going through these ups and downs. One of the stories I was talking about with someone a few days ago was this story of this king, this emperor. And what would happen was, when things in the country were going well, the economy's going well, the crops are going well, the country's prospering, he would be super excited, super happy. He'd be partying, having a great time. But then when things would go bad, if there was droughts or floods, the crops are failing, the economy's not doing so well, he would crash and he'd go into a deep depression, lock himself in his like royal chambers, his bedroom, and not deal with any of his responsibilities of being the king. And so his ministers got together and they're like, okay, this isn't working. We need to fix this. We need the king to be a little more stable, to have a little more equanimity. So they got him this little ring, and on it was inscribed, "This too shall pass." So the king, whenever he was um, on his highs, he'd just look at this ring and remember, okay, this too shall pass. This isn't permanent. Or when he crashed down into his lows and his depressed state, he could look at the ring and just remember, this is impermanent. So developing this level of wisdom and this level of understanding of impermanence helped him stay more even, more solid, more equanimous throughout life. So having this equanimity, this upekkha, this is a quality of even-mindedness, of stability, that we're not being blown around by, what we call the worldly winds. We're not going through the ups and downs of life. We're able to stay stable through things. But we have to be careful that we don't mistake equanimity for uh, something like apathy or callousness, or just this not caring, or just being bitter. So it's not like, um, we want to keep our mind even. We don't want to come in with the attitude of, oh well, life sucks anyway, so who cares? It's just, or just, I don't care what happens, and just this very like callousness. This is more stability. And again, it's one of the Brahma Viharas, these divine abidings. It's in the same list as stuff like metta and like loving kindness and compassion. So it's a positive quality that we're working on developing in our practice. So one of the one of the things that leads us to not having equanimity, to us going through these ups and downs, is attachment. So attachment is the opposite of this. You know, we're attached to the good things. You know, we don't want the bad things. So we have to work on this and work on developing this. So one of the things we do for developing this equanimity, this uh, stability of mind, you know, is always the practice of developing uh, our mindfulness through our practice. Also, you know, developing our samadhi, like our concentration, that stability of mind through our meditation. But we can't just depend on our samadhi, our concentration, to keep our mind steady and balanced. We have to develop wisdom as well. So Lumpur Biek would talk about that. If we just strictly depend on samadhi, on our concentration, to keep our minds balanced, to keep our scattered thoughts away, to keep our defilements away. It works as long as we have that samadhi, but samadhi can go through these ups and downs. And so if we are going through a period where we lose our samadhi, it all of a sudden it becomes like we've never practiced before, you know, because we become too dependent on that. So one of the things we have to do is we have to develop a certain amount of wisdom, a certain amount of discernment around these qualities to help us um, have a much more strength of mind. So um, in the suttas, when we are talking about developing the Brahma Viharas, these divine abidings, um, when it gets to developing equanimity, the reflection that we're given for it is this reflecting on karma. You know, I'm born of my karma, heir to my karma. I abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, that I shall be the heir. So it's and karma is that's karma. Karma is the Pali word for karma, and so just reflecting on these, that yeah, a lot of times, you know, what things which are happening, you know, I it may be because of stuff I've done in the past, but we can also reflect on it with other people, you know, thinking, you know, it's the same for them. Whatever karma they're doing, whatever karma they're making, you know, that's they're going to have to reap the results of that. So so we don't we can just say, okay, well, you know, whatever they do, if they do something wrong to us, you know, that's kind of their business. They're the ones who are going to get the results of that. Another one of the little wisdom practices we can do for it is one I know I mention quite often, is these reflections from Lumpur Sumedho. Um, one of the ones is, and these are kind of like his kind of like signature teaching. Some of it he's really well known for, but they also Lumpur Cha used the same teachings, and so did Lumpur Buddhadasa. You know, these teachings of just these little reflections. It's like this, you know, when we're, because a lot of times, you know, we think, oh, it shouldn't be like this, oh, it should be like that, you know, and we get swept away with that, you know, so we can just think, well, it's like this, you know, this is the way it is. Yeah, maybe it should be like that, but it's not. It's like this. And his other one is, this is the way it is. So sometimes just having these little reflections and being able to bring them up when we start to notice our mind going up, our mind getting swept away into excitement, into getting down. And so just reminding, okay, it's like this. You know, this is the way it is. And as we keep practicing that, you know, we're learning not to go through the ups and downs. So there was, you know, actually, it was when I was a kid, my grandpa used to always say, you know, when my brother and I would be getting really playing around and getting really too excited, he'd always calm us down, and he'd say, you know, when there's too much excitement and laughter, that's going to end in tears. So when you go up too high, you're going to crash too low. Actually, a monk I'm very good friends with from Indonesia said his dad used to tell him the exact same thing when he was a kid. So it's a universal thing. And and so so for us to remember that when we do get excited, we do crash. Like in Thai, for practice, one of the things of practice, they'll say "my yin di, my yin rai." So not delighting and not being averse. So again, we have to remember that this isn't getting into that being apathetic, or that we don't feel anything, or we're just going to be um we're just like kind of like a blank, almost catatonic state where we're just not affected by anything because we're so zoned out or so bitter towards the world. It's again, it's just being able to keep ourselves solid, keep ourselves even throughout our practice. And it can also help us develop our other practices of the Brahma Viharas. So with loving kindness, with compassion, because when we are developing these qualities for someone, we're developing compassion for someone, someone who's suffering. That equanimity is going to help us with that. So we don't start getting sad. We don't get brought down by that kind of, those kind of circumstances people are going through. And then over time, you can really see it in some people when they have developed this real equanimity, this real like stability of mind. So, in life, see some people who just very easy, up and down, very affected by things. And then you have some other people who are just very even. One of the best examples I've ever seen is my Upajjhaya, my preceptor, the monk who ordained me, Lumpur Liam. He's the abbot of Wapapong, and he's just the walking embodiment of equanimity. So he just does his duty, and whatever happens, he's not bothered by it. He's got tons of loving kindness, tons of metta. He's helps people out, but he's just not affected by anything. I remember once there was a time when there was someone on the internet who was apparently um, really criticizing our sangha and going off about it. And I remember one monk went to Lumpur Liam, was telling him about this, was like, "Oh, well, this person's saying all these awful things about you and us." And Lumpur Liam was just like, "Oh, I don't have the internet. Doesn't bother me." So it's just like, he wasn't bothered by it. And being around him, being around someone like that, you get this really like cool feeling, this really like just relaxed, like Thai they say yen, like really cool. And I really like Ajahn Caliano used a really great example for equanimity. He was talking about ships in the ocean, and he was saying, these big ships, these big container ships, they have to have something called ballast. So they have to have some kind of weight inside of the ship, and this actually helps them float properly. And if they have to have enough of this weight in it, otherwise they're just being tossed around by the waves. And that's what we do too. We develop this weight, this power to keep ourselves steady when things are going through the ups and downs in life, because life just inevitably has these ups and downs. But one of the things we can do as well is we can we can also limit the amount, like if we of things that come into our lives that can affect us and send us through these ups and downs. So if we know that certain something does affect us really strongly, if we have the ability to, we can reduce that. So, for example, probably one of the biggest examples is, news, politics, we, all the stuff going on in the world, it's very easy. And a lot of the news and that they're designed it to bother us, to excite us, to make us angry, to make us worried, because then you buy more and you'll watch more. And so if we do find that that's really bothering us, we can just reduce what we watch, reduce the amount which goes in. It's one of those things. This one famous Welsh monk had said before, Lumpur Panyawado. He said, anything which goes into our mind, through the ears, through the eyes, any like sensory input we have, it goes into our mind and it affects us. It affects us in different amounts. But it and depending on where your practice is, it'll be different. But it does have some effect. So if we find that we are going through these ups and downs, we can control as much as possible the amount of things which are going in. But again, we can't always control all the circumstances and have everything, perfect for us for our lives. Because it's always very easy to have equanimity, to not be affected by things when you have nothing in your life which bothers you, right? So then when you do, so that's not real equanimity. And so I'd like to encourage everyone if it's possible, to work on developing this, and and again, it's one of these things with all these other aspects of Dhamma. It just takes some time, and as we keep practicing, it's going to get better and better. And like I said, a lot of times it'll develop as a natural byproduct of our practice. As our mindfulness gets better, our concentration gets better, we're developing more wisdom, our minds will become more stable. And as we have more sila, as our behavior is better, we're not doing things that will cause grief and regret. Again, we're going to become more stable. And so, but we can also go out and intentionally develop it, and intentionally develop this stability for ourselves, for our minds, for our lives. So I would like to offer that as a bit of a reflection for everyone this evening.